Welcome back, everyone. This video is going to be a little different because I want to talk about more of like an idea rather than a single movie or like a movie series. So I just finished watching The Trial of the Chicago 7, which was about the Chicago riots in like 1969, 1968, and the trial of the 7 men that were put on trial. There was actually 8, but the 7 men that ended up getting tried for inciting riots and inciting violence. So movies like this, sort of biopics or biographies about historical events, show people what it's like to live in those moments. When you live in a classroom, growing up in high school and in college, you read stories about discrimination, prejudice, and events happening towards certain groups throughout history, and you look at those. And this may be different for everybody, but I've never really been a big reader. So those books and stories never really impacted me that much because they're just words on a page. Words can mean anything, and how you interpret them can be different for certain people. So for me, reading these words didn't really have a lasting impact on me because I couldn't visualize what it was like. Like some of the stories you hear about, they're so vile and so like hurtful that it's hard to picture what that could have been like. But then when you have movies like these that incorporate what it was like to live in that time and live in the moment of when it happened, you're much more likely to feel empathy, much more likely to understand the impact that it had on the community and why people were so upset. So a movie like The Trial of the Chicago 7 the movie was about what was supposed to be a peaceful protest that turned into a violent clash with police, and what followed was one of the most notorious trials in history. This movie reminded me a lot of, I think it was a TV series that Netflix dropped a few years back. I forgot the title of it, but it followed the Central Park Five, which was a trial and the life of 5 black men that were convicted of raping and almost murdering a woman running in the park in Central Park. And that show correlates to this because you get to see what it's like to live through those people and understand what they were doing in their everyday lives before everything switched around. You can see that they were just normal kids having fun, going outside, playing their everyday activities, and then one day this establishment just decides to uproot them from that life and absolutely ruin their futures, their careers, their morals, tear them down, and treat them like they're less than human. And I think both of those do a great job at showing the injustices that our country has faced in the past. And I know that sounds kind of cliche, like it's a trend now to hop on, oh, our country's so unjust, it targets minorities, it targets people of all sorts of different categories, but to actually see that on TV, you can understand why people could be so upset. And I think Netflix does a good job of dropping these at periods of time where people will relate to them the most. I think they dropped the Central Park 5 show around the time where everybody was upset with police and police brutality, so it gained a lot of traction. I understood where people were getting their frustrations from. But looking back on it, I thought it was pretty important to be able to watch that because you hear stories of judges and attorneys being impartial or being partial all the time, and how our justice system was so corrupt, and you're like, no, it couldn't have been like that. It's the justice system, it's the law above all laws. And it's hard to believe that people in those positions of power could hurt so many people, but it's true. And when you get movies like these, it shows the impact that those people can have on the community. And I already talked about this, but being able to visualize it is important because words can really be interpreted however you want, and history kind of gets written by the victor. So whoever comes out winning that situation is able to interpret it and write it down however they perceive it or they portrayed the situation. But being able to visualize it and understand the impacts that it had on those communities and understand what happened in those moments, I think is more important than just reading words in a book and skimming right over it. And the book readers might feel a little different about that than me. I've just never been a big book person. I like to be able to visualize what it was like to live in that moment. And this relates to another movie I saw this week called Fruitvale Station that starred Michael B. Jordan and was produced by the same guy that made the Black Panther movies. And that followed the life of a young man who was a drug dealer who was in and out of prison, but starts to turn his life around, starts to finally get his family back intact. His life is going well. He's trying to earn the legal way through the system, being able to provide for his family and become a good father and a good husband. And then one night on New Year's Eve, a person from his past comes up to him, tries to start a fight. The police get called, and this was during one of the most racial periods in U.S. history, and you have 5 black men lined up on a wall and just police officers treating like absolute animals. And it's hard to watch because you can hear stories like that in the news, you can read stories about that, but nothing compares to being able to see it with your own eyes and see the emotions on people's faces, and watching a movie knowing you can't do anything about that it's history, and that you can't act on what you feel like because you feel encapsulated in rage and emotion, and you can't do anything about it because it's on a screen and it's history, it's already passed. But you can still feel sympathy for those people that went through those events. The man that was in Fruitvale Station that Michael B. Jordan was portraying ended up getting shot and killed by police that night. I'm not trying to undermine people's experiences, but to see what our justice system used to be and to see how long or how far it's progressed is pretty impactful too, especially being able to see it on screen and experience it in real life, because the amount of racial divide in our country during those time periods was insane. And to believe that we had judges and prosecutors and cops acting and treating people like they did during that time was absolutely crazy. And that's why I wanted to make this video, because I know it may sound political, it may sound cliche or dumb, and to some viewers it may sound like a pushover video, but I think it's important to understand that movies can mean so much more than just an action sequence. I think a lot more people need to look into historical biographies and look into historical films like this, because it shows what we did in the past and how to correct it. It gives us a roadmap of how to correct our future actions. And people saying history repeats itself are absolutely correct in that assumption, because people continue to get away with injustices, and I think it's unfair to have these layouts of what we're supposed to do and what not to do and to completely ignore them. So that's why I think movies are so important, especially for our generation, because people are so encapsulated in media that if you just take a little bit of time out of your regular action-packed movies or just fantasy thrillers, I think you can really learn a lot about history and understand why I enjoy movies so much. So thank you for your time. I know that video was kind of boring maybe for some people, but I thought it needed to be said, especially after watching those 3 projects. I know there's a lot more projects than just Fruitvale Station, the Trial of the Chicago 7, and the Central Park 5, but those are the 3 that I think encapsulates the idea that being able to put those ideas onto a motion picture and people being able to visually see them, I think that incorporates that idea the best. So let me know what you guys think, and any suggestions for future videos, let me know. Thank you. Bye.